evening and thank you for joining us. You're watching Sunday Interview with me, Grevazio Zulu. Now, Konkola Copper Mines has one of the largest mining assets based at Nchanga in Chingola, Konkola in Chililabombwe, Nkana in Kitwe, and of course, Nampundwe. But close to a decade now, production has been dwindling, especially during the last 3 years when government attempted to grab the mine from Vedanta through a liquidation process. But government last week finally handed KCM assets back to Vedanta Resources. Big announcements are being made. $1 billion United States in investment in the next 5 years, 250 million payments to creditors, and 20% as salary increment for the workers at KCM. Is this mere talk and promises, or the nation is witnessing a new and born-again Vedanta? Mines and Minerals Development Minister Chongo Kabuswe is on the program this evening to discuss the KCM deal and answer questions on the future of mining in the country. Sir, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Grevazio. Good evening to our viewers, and if there are listeners out there, good evening, and thank you for hosting me.
You can now breathe a sigh of relief. One of the major hurdles is out of the way, Konkola Copper Mines. It's been a talk by so many people.
Well, thank you so much. Sigh of relief, I'll say that, well, 50–60% sigh of relief, because I want to see the implementation of that agreement. Then I'll rest. So
we are talking, it's been 3 long years of court case and negotiations. The case is over. Vedanta gets back the assets. In essence, you've agreed to allow Vedanta to take control of the operations of KCM.
Exactly.
People will be asking, when do they fully take control? Is it yesterday? Is it last week? Is it tomorrow? Is it after a month? Is it after 2 weeks?
Of course, when ZCCM-IH was announcing through the board chair, they have given themselves a transition period of 3 months, which I believe we can even push it forward, you know, working together, because there are processes that have to run because of the state in which the mine was in terms of provisional liquidation. They have to run the process of, taking it out of liquidation, restatement of shareholders and implementation agreements. And of course, you know, scheme of arrangement in terms of creditors and all that. So these processes have a little bit of time, and then fine-tuning the very agreements like the shareholders agreement, which is critical to the success of the mine, and also the implementation agreement. So when these are finished, I think that's when now we'll see things beginning to flow in terms of the monies that are supposed to come in the mine.
You talk about the implementation agreement, shareholders agreement,
yes,
and commitments that should be legally binding.
Yes.
And people are wondering, what are the finer details? Are you keeping those to yourself? Shouldn't the public know? Of course, we've heard the 1 billion, 250, and 20%. Those are the ones that are really standing out. What are other finer details? What is government giving up?
Well, the finer, I don't know what you mean by finer details unless you go in the specifics, but I think that in our agreement, in our, discussions and negotiations, one of the things that was key is the investment in the mine, because what we wanted to center on, Grevazio, and through you, the public, is to make sure that whatever agreement was put in place is people-centered in terms of, benefit to our people, our workers, suppliers, contractors, and of course, development of the mine. But the key thing in the development of the mine is the KDMP, the Konkola Deep Mining Project, because that is the future of KCM. So when you say the finer details, unless you ask the specifics, but I think the ones that we have mentioned are key areas, because the mine cannot flourish if there is no investment. One of the things that KCM has been grappling with is lack of finances, lack of cash flow in the mine, and also that has resulted in the fact that there is no development that has been going on because there is no money. There hasn't been investment in the mine for a long time.
Was that the 10th point that held on the talks? I mean, at one point you came to the public and said there's one key point that we need to get over.
No.
And it held back for close to a month, over a month even.
No, that was on the deemed offer. Because what we have done in that agreement is that we have given conditions to Vedanta that if you do not perform if you do not fund, if finances are not forthcoming, it will trigger a deemed offer, and it has been spread, you know, between, I think, for a period of 5 years in which they must show, you know, that the finances are coming in. So each year has got a particular condition on which, if finances are not coming, it triggers a deemed offer. What I mean by a deemed offer, Grevazio, maybe to break it down.
For the layman, yes.
Yes, I want the layman to understand. I was watching one of the jokes by one of our comedians who was saying, sometimes these things, you are using too much technicalities that people may not understand. So I want to bring it down to, so that, you know, we are able to be on the same page with our people. So what the deemed offer means, Grevazio, is that if they do not perform, and it is proven that, for example, in the first year, money does not come, then that triggers a deemed offer, and it is proved that the money never came. It actually triggers a deemed offer. So what that means is that now us, and we call Vedanta to the table and say, you have failed here, so we are taking your shares to Apoka mine.
The whole 79%
yes.
shares?
Yes. That's what it means.
And you've agreed on that point, it seems.
That is why those discussions were going on, because the deemed offer itself has a price to itself. You know, there is a value that you give to a deemed offer. So in the first year, the shares will be valued at 0%.
And in the second year?
Well, in the second year, I may not break it down. We will definitely make public this document, because I'm not a legal person. So I may maybe not really, you know, break it down as it is in the document, but we'll make it public. You'll see it.
There's already talk running during the rounds on social media that as government, you are ready for giving 1.5 billion in date.
That is not true. That is not true. The way the agreement has been structured, Grevazio, is that that asset, when you look at the KCM asset, it was going down, it was in negative. So that asset will have to be invested in, developed, reconstructed, until it reaches a point where it is cash positive. And when it is cash positive, it must begin to pay the debt. But what I'll say is this, that if, for example, Vedanta came in today, what will happen is that they will be paying all the current debts. For example, ZESCO must be paid, workers' salaries will be paid, everything, every CEC will be paid, you know, the current debt will be paid, like what they accumulate in a month must be paid to zero, all right? Then there are what are known as legacy debts. So the legacy debts have been, you know, put in what they are calling a waterfall, all right? Where, for example, if the asset becomes cash positive in the next 2 years, then the monies now begin to drop in those legacy debts, because that mine has very serious legacy debts, which must be settled. We have not taken them out. We have not forgiven Vedanta on those. They have to be paid.
So when you talk legacy dates, which dates are we looking at? For instance, I'll give an example. They owe CEC over 170 million.
So what will remain is after that 250 million that has been given as into the scheme of arrangement. That has got different components. It has got local suppliers and contractors. It has got part of the component in that debt is actually ZESCO. Part of the component in that debt is CEC. So all that will be broken down when the scheme of arrangement is done.
Now here's one critical question that people are asking. At what point did you realize as government that Vedanta was the best investor for KCM? Because I don't want to take you back to pre-election talk. That was, of course, campaigns. But post-election, when this information leaked, government denied it and said, well, we're not giving back the money to KCM. At what point did you realize KCM was the better option to take, Vedanta was the better option to take over KCM?
Thank you very much, you know, for that question. What happened, Grevazio, is this. When we took over, we discovered that, I'll talk generally the mining sector, then zero in on Vedanta. We discovered that the whole mining sector was actually in court. Most of the mines were fighting. First Quantum, KCM itself, Mopani had that agreement which nobody liked.
Which you wanted to take to court?
Which nobody, that was a bad deal. I don't even want to go in the details. That was a very, I call it rotten deal myself. So we looked at how do we make the mining sector begin to function? Because it was not functioning. For us, it was in disarray. And I don't want to go in the past. So we said one of the reasons, Grevazio, is that we are mining in court. We are busy. You know, there are squabbles in mines, people are fighting. And so His Excellency the President said, Minister, we can't mine in court. We must mine at the mine site. So can we look at all these assets and analyze whether these legal battles that they are fighting have a future or not? Because we need to mine on the mine site, and we are behind. You know, KCM itself was going down in terms of production figures. First Quantum had halted any sort of investment. So we said, okay, we start with First Quantum. Let's get out of court. We sat around the table. We discussed. We came to agreements. And one thing I'll tell you, Grevazio, in transactions and agreements, you win some, you lose some. That's how you do agreements. So we sat with First Quantum, we discussed, we debated, and we came up with an agreement. What was the result? $1.2 billion worth of investment unlocked in First Quantum. The second thing, one of the biggest nickel mines was again unlocked $100 million. So we said, I think this is the right way to go. Let's analyze the KCM Vedanta problem that is in court. After we sat and analyzed, and I want to say this, Grevazio, I'm from Chililabombwe myself. I saw the misbehavior that was around the, you know, KCM by the investor who was Vedanta then. I didn't like it. I didn't like what they were doing. But we also needed to look at what is the bigger picture. How do we proceed to make this asset begin to function again? Because it stops functioning.
So you were stuck for options. You had no option.
Can I be allowed to finish? So now, we analyzed the KCM court case. And we said, this case, one, it will drag on and on and on and on. It is dragging on from 2019. There hasn't been a solution. We took over in 2021, meaning 3 years. 2022, there were, in fact, it had even timelines on which cases we are going to come up. The time we were taking over in 2021, we were told that the Vedanta versus KCM legal issue will only come up in January of 2022. All right? And that coming up meant that they are not even going to judge or say this one is right or this one is wrong. It was to say, did you sit in arbitration? Have you agreed or not? If you haven't, then the case continues. Meaning 2022 will have finished. They are just battling in court, yet the asset is suffering. The people are losing jobs. Development ends at Konkola were being shut. We were threatened with, that mine flooding because it had only one pump chamber, and if we had an unfortunate occurrence or catastrophe where the pump chamber actually fell, we are going to have a flooded mine. Konkola, when you look at it, if you don't pump water for 1-2 hours in Konkola, the mine is flooded and you lose it, then we are going to even have a much bigger problem than what we are looking at. So we said, let us call the devil that is there. Let's say we get out of court. I think we announced to the country that government and Vedanta have gotten out of court. Now let's analyze where the problem was. Why did they behave the way they behaved? And then we began to put the pieces together and we negotiated, because Grevazio, if you get out of court with someone, it means that very person is the person you are going to be negotiating with, because you are saying
automatically you're given back the mine.
Yeah, when
all
you
you
say,
needed was just to agree on terms.
Of course, when you say that,
but then you really wanted nothing to do with Vedanta at the beginning. I know as late as April 2022, you were still denying any connection
every human
to getting
being,
Vedanta back onto
I hear you. Every human being, Grevazio, has a right to a second opinion over any matter in life. Always. That's the way it works.
Now, I'll ask you this, Minister.
Yes.
Have you taken time to study the report and coupled with the ministerial statement that was done by your predecessor in 2019 as government was taking over the mine?
Yes.
Never mind the mode of takeover. It could have been unpleasant and probably you didn't like it. But the issues were very clear then, very categorical. And they stated that Vedanta had no capacity to run the mine because they had failed to inject capital into the mine. One of them was that they failed to develop Chingola and Chililabombwe mining areas, and they failed to carry out operations in there. Declining mineral production, the figures were there, and I'm sure you've read them. That's 132 tons in 2013 to 86,585 tons in 2017.
Yeah.
So what capacity did Vedanta convince you on, other than telling you this is our mine?
You can look at the timelines, Grevazio. I'll tell you this. When you look at those timelines, what was that particular government doing to allow an investor to misbehave for all that period? What lacked during the KCM days, Vedanta days, under whoever was doing the report you are referring to, my predecessor, was the fact that they were not supervising the mine. They were not supervising the whole mining sector, actually.
This report was given by a technical committee of experts appointed, I think, in 2013.
I'm not disputing the report.
Maybe the question you need to answer, Minister, is what capacity is Vedanta telling you they have, apart from telling you that this is our mine, give it back to us?
When you are doing negotiations, Grevazio, and that is why it took long, there is what is known as a technical due diligence. You do it. That is why it is a team. It's not only Kabuswe negotiating. There is a technical team, there is the Council of Ministers, there are advisors, all right? There are advisors who are commercial advisors and legal advisors. So, before we could seal any negotiations with Vedanta, we said, can we have a technical due diligence done together with a financial due diligence? And we hired together ZCCMIH, Vedanta agreed. There was nothing like Vedanta brings this technical expert alone or ZCCMIH. We sat and looked at the best company that can do a technical due diligence, and we hired a company called Hatch. And there is what we are calling a Hatch report, which gives us a technical due diligence both on the mine and on Vedanta themselves, whether they have the capacity to do what they were saying. Because when you look at that promise, Grevazio, it was the first thing that Vedanta gave us to say, can we do these things so that you bring us back in the mine? We said we cannot just agree by you flashing a piece of paper to say you can bring 1.5 billion, you can bring 200 million for suppliers. All the list that they had put, the 20 million for CSR, we said we cannot agree just yet, because we need to do these processes on yourself and on the mine. So we did the technical due diligence, the financial due diligence, how much will be needed. And there is a report, which we are calling a Hatch report, which now gives details of how the financing should come in order to resuscitate that mine. It also gives a report on the creditors. It also gives a report on the kind of CSR programs that we need, because we had put our cards on the table. It also now gives us an assurance to say Vedanta has the capacity to bring in this money. And that's when the decision was made to say, okay, the $1 billion for development, yes, we agree, you are able to do it. The $200 million, yes, we agree, you are able to do it. So when we saw that After doing the due diligence on them and on the mine, then we said, okay, on the agreement, I think we are set. Now let's do conditions on the deemed offer. And in the agreement, Grevazio, we have said, for example, before you step in the mine as Vedanta, number one, the money that you have said CSR per year must be in the bank. You work with it on the mine. Number two, the creditor settlement, kuisa na shwe mpia, you can't.
Must be in the bank.
Yes. The first tranche for the mine development, because that $1 billion, Grevazio,
it's over a period of 5 years.
It's
so
over
the
a
first
period.
tranche is how much?
I think according to the Hatch report, it starts with $200 and something million.
Yes. Let's get in a caller, Minister.
Yes.
You can call us in on 253025 or 251901. Right now we have a caller, Mwansa from Kawamba. Go ahead with your question. Please be brief and to the point.
Hello.
Good evening, Mwansa.
Good evening, Grevazio, and good evening, Honorable Minister.
Good evening, Mwansa.
Okay, thank you. I'm calling you from Kawamba. Minister, I just want to appreciate the good work that the New Dawn government is doing.
Go ahead, Mwansa. We need to get your point very quickly. Okay, we seem to have lost Mwansa, though he's appreciating the good work that you're doing.
Yeah.
But you will pick that compliment later.
Yeah.
But you were talking about doing two technical due diligence and financial. This is where the other concern is.
Yeah.
The technical report that was done in 2013,
yes,
I think appointed by the late President Sata then,
yes,
it came up, it almost declared Vedanta as highly indebted and almost insolvent. So people are concerned that then we're getting a company that is highly indebted to come back and take over an asset which is struggling. Is that the position that you got as you were studying that Vedanta is struggling with
I am
debt?
not going to defend or be, you know, the one that stands on behalf of Vedanta. If I'm going into a deal with you and you show me proven capacity, whether people have got other stories about you, but you yourself, you show me proven capacity that you are able to do this. Yes, I'll listen from the negatives, but I'll take a risk and say, okay, because business transactions are about a risk, all right? We need to do the right thing. So we did our own due diligence. We did technical and financial. And we had proven report that they are able to do what they are able to do in terms of, you know, Konkola copper mines. So where we are seated, we are comfortable. That's why I told you that I'm 60% with a sigh of relief, but I'm waiting for that.
For the 40% to roll out.
To roll out.
We've got Kosten from Kapiri.
That is the money I'm waiting for.
Go ahead and ask your question. Kosten, good evening.
Good evening, Grevazio Zulu.
Please go ahead, Kosten. You're welcome to show. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, good evening, Minister there.
Good evening. Thank you, Kosten.
Yeah, I'm all right. This is Kosten calling from Kapirimponshi. No, I just want to recommend the New Dawn government on the work which you have done to unlock the KNC mine there, because a lot of people are being languishing and being troubled for lacking of employment. Now we have seen that the way you have done to negotiate over the KCM, you have created a lot of employment, whereby a lot of people will be employed right up now. Even us here in Kapiri, I don't know what I can do for me to find myself there so that I may be employed there.
Kosten, thank you so much. We've got your compliment. Thank you so much, Minister. Compliment for you there on how you've resolved and unlocked the KCM problem.
I'll enjoy these compliments when I see jobs begin to flourish, when I see the mine begin to breathe. Right now, our focus, Grevazio, is to make sure that, you know, these transaction documents are signed and the money begins to flow and the mine begins to breathe again. Then that will give us, you know, the excitement and say, okay, now we are going in the right direction. As it stands now, we have unlocked, we have announced, there is no more speculation. We have told the country where we are going, but we are not going to relax, Grevazio. We want to make sure this mine performs, this mine functions. And you know, of course we have given the condition Grevazio to say we will trigger a deemed offer. But our focus as a government is not to make this mine fail so that we chase Vedanta. Our focus is to use the very devil that is there to make sure he does the right thing and the mine works, because if the mine doesn't work, or if the mine doesn't perform, or if Vedanta doesn't perform, the first casualty are the workers, the community around that mine. So for us, even if we have put these conditions to say, if you don't finance, then you are gone, our focus is to be positive and say, let the mine work, let the mine perform. So in terms of, thank you very much for the kudos that are coming and the praises to the president and his team. Our focus and the focus of His Excellency the President is to make sure the KCM mine functions, and cardinal and center to this agreement is the KDMP, Konkola Deep Mining Project. So yes, there was that report that was done, which, you know, we appreciate technical experts were put in place. But what I see in the report are the gaps that allowed an investor to begin to misbehave. And this is what we are not going to do ourselves.
An investor who pledged FDI and never brought it?
Yes.
Before you answer that, Minister, there's a caller before we lose him. Yeah. Gilbert from Chipata. Gilbert, you're welcome to the program. Go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening, Grevazio.
Good evening, Shah.
Good evening, Honorable Kabuswe.
Good evening, Gilbert.
Now that KCM has been unlocked, when is Mopani Copper Mines going to be unlocked?
Thank you so much, Gilbert. Mopani. I know the president was announcing on Friday that it would be.
Yeah, because we wanted to make sure that you know, we do these things methodically. So for Mopani, like I said the other day, for Mopani, it's like a meal that is already on the table. We are just waiting to call Grevazio and Monday Mudie. That's the point where we are at. So I
soon. How soon is soon?
Maybe. No, I'm not going to say soon.
The president said soon, really.
Yeah,
on Friday he said very soon.
Of course. I think the president made it very clear. And when the president speaks, it's because advisors around him, who are us ministers, technical people, have said you can go ahead and say very soon because we are almost done.
Not the soon of the KCM. I know that one was longer. Was a longer soon than the soon that everybody knows.
Yeah,
we've got Mr. Mlenga on the line. Mr. Mlenga from Lusaka. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Grevazio, good evening.
Good evening.
Minister, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mlenga.
Yes. I have one question for you, Minister.
Yes, sir.
I feel, as a Zambian, during negotiations, the government had the upper hand than the vendetta. My question is, why didn't you negotiate for a higher shareholding percentage? Because I believe vendetta has the 80%, and that system IH, I think 20%. Why didn't you go maybe for 40% to 60% so that us Zambians have some large stake in the mine? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mlenga.
So I answer
yes, you can answer this one. So it's a major concern. It's not only Mr. Mlenga and other people also saying,
you know,
why did we push for a higher stake in the mine? We only have 20.6.
20.9.
20.9.
What we did first, Grevazio, is to reinstate the status quo. Okay, now in the negotiations, of course, going forward, we are looking for instances where we do better deals than we have done in terms of shareholding as a country. That I can agree with Mr. Mlenga, that you know, we need to look at these issues. These negotiations are not over in inverted commas. We can still go back to Vedanta and sit and say, okay, now that you are working the mine, government wants to increase its stake. What does it take for us to increase the stake? We can do that.
So you were talking about investment and of course date.
Yeah.
Let me take you back to date and push you to investment.
Yeah.
The issue of date is an issue of people being worried that it may take longer for Vedanta and KCM to declare profits. During your negotiations, was there a date or a year set as the earliest when the asset could declare a profit?
There is a report, Grevazio, which we did ourselves before, which was done at KCM before, the Vedanta KCM negotiations began. And in that report, it clearly states that because of the state of the asset, it will not be less than, 3-4 years before we begin to see it being cash positive. I'm sure, probably let me break it down. Before we see the mine break even, I'll give you an example. For the pump chamber at KDMP to finish, it's a minimum of 3 years. Now, Konkola Deep, Grevazio, I will explain it in very simpler terms. I won't explain it like a technical person. What we have at KCM, I want to be as simple as possible, is a situation where we have an ore body, which we have to access and mine it out. Now, where it is sitting, there is a lot of water. So we have to deepen that shaft, build a pump chamber that will pump the water out. You know that KCM Konkola is one of the wettest, if not the wettest mines. So for us to construct that pump chamber, or for Vedanta now, because now it's them running, to construct that pump chamber, a minimum of 3 years must go before they begin to access the ore at KDMP. Whether you have $1 trillion to invest on that, just the construction process, there is curing, there are pumps that should be manufactured, and all those processes. For them to finish, at least 3 years must, minimum. Then there are other ends that were closed because there was no investment. They have to begin to develop them, because mining, the way you do it, especially underground mining, you have to dig, I'm using very easy language, you have to dig access routes to where the copper is, and that is the copper ore. That is what is called development. You have to do haulages, then sub-levels and all that. So when that is done, it will take a certain period of time for it to be done. All right? Of course, now there is new technology. You can move faster. Maybe kill a bit of time. So whichever way you do it, it has to take a certain amount of time for you to begin to access ore which you should mine and begin to sell. Now, that is the period we are saying it will take a certain period of time for the mine to be cash positive, where the mine begins to make money, in short.
And then make a profit. So
and make money, a profit.
3 to 4 years. Make
First
a profit.
It has to begin to make money. It has to be cash positive. Right now, KCM, even Mopani, is cash negative. Whatever you sell, you are making losses. So the mine is cash negative.
Did you agree on any year that you likely be expecting a profit from?
The Hatch report has that. And the Hatch report, if you go, it's a public document now. You can go to KCM and say, or Vedanta themselves, can I look at the Hatch report and see what it says in terms of, when the mine will reach a point where
are you going to publish yourself?
Well, if it requires that we publish it and the public looks at it, well, it's a technical document.
We have a caller, Minister. I think it's been holding on for long. Robert,
to be understood.
You've been holding on long. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Minister.
Good evening, thank you, sir.
Yes, I'm calling from Chingola.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to ask Grevazio. Grevazio, to ask the Honorable Minister, when is the information going to trickle down to the workers and the community? Because as far as we are concerned, it ended on the issue of the press conference. And about the workers, when is the 20% going to be effected? Because there is a lot of noise on the ground. The 20% workers don't know when it's going to be implemented. It has brought in anxiety. Apart from that, this issue of liquidation, the miners have saved for 3 years now, almost 3 years. When is the liquidation going to end, and what will happen to the service they rendered? Because according to the Liquidation Act, they're supposed to be paid 3 months pay per HSF. I want the Honorable Minister to give us the light on that. My name is Nzoa Robert.
Robert, thank you so much for the question. Minister, that's a loaded question for you.
That's a very loaded question, and
two or three parts.
Yeah,
when is the information trickling down?
And I think
they watched your press conference, and that's it.
No.
Do they get
Grevazio, I'm just coming from Chingola. I was in Chingola and Chililabombwe yesterday. As you see me, I've just arrived from the Copper Belt. I was in Kitwe, I was in Chingola, I was in Chililabombwe. Yesterday in Chingola, we were on radio, on a radio station called iWave. We also met pastors because they invited us that they want to do a press briefing to support what we've done. Even in that, we explained what is happening and what is going on. So I'll ask Mr. Is it Robert?
Yes.
Mr. Nzoa to please follow what is happening, read the news, because we have been explaining, we met the unions. Actually, we met
when is the increment?
Union.
When is the increment? It's a key for them.
Implementation, Grevazio, like I said, these due processes must run. The increment for miners, I want to make it very clear, is immediately they step on the mine. Like I said on the CSR, that they work with the money on the mine.
So that's like 3 months.
Immediately, 3 months was what ZCCMIH gave, but we are trying to push that time is brought forward, because I'm from Chilabombo. I'm equally in a hurry to see development, begin to flow there. So immediately they work on the mine. Workers will be given, first and foremost, a bonus of 2,500 kwacha. Secondly, 20% salary increment is immediate. Then he asked about when the liquidation is going to end. Now the court will run that process of reinstating the board and removing the provisional liquidator. So those are the legal processes that are going to run. Any payments to the workers? Yes. He mentioned something that the workers have to pay. What I know in the agreement is that there will be one-off payment of 2,500. There will also be the increment of 20% immediately. No any other payment outside in terms of the liquidation. That is what I know of right now. So we're talking about KDMP. Yes. This is a project that has been standing since KCM, Vedanta came. Yes. That's way back, 2004. Yeah. It has not been executed. That is one of the key issues in the agreement. Very key. No KDMP, Vedanta must explain. KDMP is non-negotiable. It is the future of KCM. So it's non-negotiable. Part of the funding that they're talking about is going to go to KDMP. There is no negotiation on KDMP. It is one of the things they must touch immediately they step on the mine. Because without that, there is no future for Konkola Copper Mines. Are there targets agreed in terms of production per year? I know as government, you've said yourself, 3 million metric tons in 10 years. Yeah. For KCM, how much are they pushing in that
During
figure?
the negotiations, what we agreed was the mine must be taken to 300 metric tons of production per year.
In how many years?
Well, now that would, again, you are telling me to break down the Hatch report because it gives that on how that can be done. That is why ZCCMIH as a shareholder now on behalf of government must be on their toes to make sure that these things are being followed, because they will now have a board that should overlook now the executive so that they do the right thing. But as government, we have the Mines and Minerals Act also to check. And for this one, Grevazio, we are not only going to check Vedanta. I have announced that this government will follow the Mines and Minerals Act to the latter, meaning for KCM, for Mopani, for First Quantum, for all the mines in Zambia, we are going to follow the law and will supervise the mines as provided for in the Mines and Minerals Act.
So are you able to talk generally, just a bit away from
Vedanta and KCM.
Yes.
How well are you doing in terms of meeting your target? 2 years is gone already, in terms of meeting 3 million metric tons in 10
The
years.
resolution of KCM is part of that. The resolution of Mopani is part of that because these are key assets.
Do you think you'll meet the target?
We will. We have done a matrix which is telling us on which assets we must touch to reach the 3 million tons that we want to reach. We are very positive that we will. If we don't Grevazio...
Isn't that a dream, Minister? I mean,
no,
at our
it's
best,
not. It's not.
Probably in the last more than 10 years.
Yes.
The country, I think, hasn't hit more than 1.5 metric tons.
Yeah, because we have not been doing the job. That is the reason.
That's more than 10 years.
We have not been exploring. We are allowed mining
do you
companies
think exploration
to be
will take
fighting.
place in 8 years? Conclude, invest,
I think
develop,
you heard the president's
produce?
speech
8
that
years?
will be doing mapping. No. For example, Grevazio. If Vedanta follows the program as has been agreed, KCM alone will hit 300,000 metric tons. Mopani, in fact, is less of a complicated asset. The target is 250. Just the two of them can hammer 500 plus. Just the two of them.
And where do you expect
now
to get the
the country is at
2.5?
700 plus. So meaning that we have Kansanshi mining, all right? We have Lumwana mining. So these assets that I'm mentioning alone can maybe give us 1.5 if we make sure that, you know, the policy environment, which I think they are excited about, is conducive enough to be able to support that.
We've got a caller, Justin from Luancha. Justin, go ahead with your question.
I'm Sodusa. Good evening, Grevazio.
Good evening.
Yes, I'm disappointed by the minister. Mr. Nzoa from Chingola asked him a question, but he has failed to answer that question and is saying that he should read the papers, listen to the news. That's not the way he's supposed to come out as a minister. What would have happened is that he was supposed to have tackled the question.
Which one?
The one that was answered by the previous caller, Mr. Nzoa from Chingola.
Can you specify because I've answered?
Maybe you'd want to repeat the part that you feel has not been answered.
Because I answered.
Let me not waste time. Grevazio told me that I should stick myself to a minute. I wanted to find out what guarantee is there that if this Vedanta misbehaves, you're going to take action against him. Because you remember there was a documentary some time back, supposed to be some 2, 3, 5 years ago, or if not mistaken, supposed to have been 10, where I was there priding himself that if you want to make money, you should go to Zambia. It's like this person, Ale Tuseka Ifwe. I don't know if Grevazio might have read of that or watched that documentary on Press TV. No, but suppose this person misbehaves. And what guarantee do you have again? You cover the suppliers and contractors. When he comes, he's going to honor his payment of the suppliers and the contractors. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bang. So there you are, Minister. Disappointed with you. You're not giving the information as they need. 2, you are dealing with a notorious investor. He's repeated that himself. He says, this is a man he's probably watched on social media.
We have said
bragging about how much money is made out of the asset.
We have said ourselves, Grevazio, that if an investor is not being supervised, I'll repeat this, and that is why sometimes, you know, we want to refer to the past. The behavior of any investor is highly dependent on the culture and the leadership that is in place at the time, whether they are allowing investors, not only Vedanta, anyone, to misbehave. There are enough laws in Zambia to curtail misbehavior by investors. Enough laws. The challenge that we have had, I don't know whether probably it's a challenge of, certain governments, is to go to bed with investors. When an investor comes, you go in a separate room, he gives you 2 kwacha, then you come to table to negotiate. Already you have sold your country. I think when we were announcing, you heard me publicly tell Vedanta that can you underline the word resuscitate?
And in that room, I also said, we are going to follow the law to the latter, meaning we implement the law. This government is saying respect to the rule of law. The questions that Mr. Nzoa asked, which he is referring to, I said immediately, because Mr. Nzoa wanted to know when the money will come for workers, whether there will be the salary increment of 20% when it will come. I said immediately they walk in. And in the agreement, it is structured like that. That Vedanta didadi nefe mule ingila muke CM, mwa ingila lelo. Kuisa ne fiola fianda la mefkachita, I'm simplifying, of course it is in the bank. You have to have money for the workers, which you have said 20% we have increased salaries. CSR, $20 million for the 4 places where KCM is found must be in the bank. Payment for suppliers and contractors immediately must be done. Number 4, we have put in place to say if he misbehaves, it will trigger a deemed offer. Now, these things, Grevazio, are not done if a government does not care. Because when you look at the misbehavior of Vedanta in the past, there was the Mines and Minerals Act, which should have been followed. But what we are saying as UPND government is that we will follow the laws that provides for us to act in a certain way to the latter. If, for example, ZCCMIH reports to government that Vedanta is misbehaving in a certain way, quickly we dispatch the Ministry of Mines officials, go and check if these things are happening. And if they are happening, invoke the law. Don't even spare any investor. Don't, there will be no sacred cows. Everybody must abide by the laws that Zambia has provided to check itself. And Grevazio, investment when it comes, it shouldn't be a threat to you to say, maybe we don't check them, they will go. No. This government is saying, we don't care who you are.
You're going to check you. Minister, we seem to be thin on time, but I want you to answer this one before you leave. We got information that thousands of miners, small-scale miners, others would want to call them illegal miners, have invaded KCM pits during the time that Vedanta was away. How do you plan to deal with these problems? It's going to be a big problem in the hands of Vedanta as well as government.
The way
estimated at 15,000.
The way the law, no, that's not
a huge number.
That is not correct. There cannot be 15,000 Grevazio.
Illegal miners.
No. How? Where do
small scale miners? Let's call them
is a lie.
Miners.
People are just throwing those as lies. Where can 15,000 people be? Because do you know right now the total number of miners working in KCM? Just that mine. Because where there are 15,000, it means the whole mine is invaded.
That will be very visible.
It will be very visible.
So let's look at the numbers that are there without really looking at specific numbers.
Let me finish this one.
You have illegal miners around there.
If they are illegal miners, the law provides that the license holder must deal with issues of illegal mining. That is the law. In the mines,
are you going to allow these people to mine, then they can maybe sell their ore to KCM?
Well,
as a way of empowering them?
If for example, the new mine owner says, this is how we can structure them so that they are not, called illegal miners. It is okay for us as long as they are doing safe mining. Because the challenge with illegal mining is that there's a lot of unsafe mining and people end up dying. We have to do, or they have to do, a properly structured artisanal miners around the mine, who they can support, who they can develop. Because in the agreement, Grevazio, one of the things that is there is supplier contractor development. That is there. So if also we can support so-called illegal miners who we are actually formalizing, and if there can be a way to formalize miners around the KCM asset, so be it, and that can actually be good for them, because then they will have production figures going up, which is also good for us, because then our 3 million tons, target will be reached.
Will be made very easy. Yeah. Minister, we've got a minute to go. 30 seconds. Your message on the future of mining.
For me, where we sit, the future of mining is very bright. I'm excited with what I'm seeing because of the things that we've put in place as New Dawn government. I'm very excited, and I know that the mining sector will never be the same in Zambia, and the long cry of no benefit from the minerals in Zambia will be a thing of the past.
And your 3 million is on target.
Indeed.
You've been watching Sunday Interview, and our guest this evening was the Minister of Mines and Minerals Development, Mr. Chongo Kabuswe, who was explaining the KCM deal and the future of mining in Zambia. Pleasant viewing.
Zambia has always been home, a special place where something is always happening. And information must be shared with the peace-loving citizens. And after all this time, it still remains a privilege for us to deliver information to you. Appreciating our stories, our people, our way of life. The things that really matter to us.
Zambia has been growing its democracy steadily. This has seen different personalities joining politics and participating in the political landscape. One such personality is Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, an economist, farmer, and self-styled politician. Mr. Hakainde Hichilema came into the political limelight in 2006 as the leader of the United Party for National Development. That same year, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema led the party and participated in the general elections to unseat the ruling MMD party. However, the results were disputed as the UPND claimed that the election was rigged. In 2011, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema lost elections again as Michael Sata of Patriotic Front, PF, was elected as president. Despite the loss, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema relentlessly continued to lead the UPND, rallying his supporters and calling for change. The party's message resonated with many Zambians.